Welcome to Taxidermy Truths, where we discuss the ins and outs of not only the taxidermy process, but the influences on the hunting community as a whole. With over 25 years in the wildlife and taxidermy industry, I host open conversations with artists, experts, and industry giants. From sustainable utilization to shipping rates, we dig into the reality of the experience after the safari and hear real stories worth remembering. Hi there, my name is Doug Cocroft and welcome to Taxidermy Truths. Today joining me is an incredibly talented mold maker. Sjoerd, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Doug.
This is going to be a bit of a show and tell, and we're going to dig into a few of the intricacies surrounding molding and recreating replicas of incredible African species. So we've got our workbench kind of laid out over here. Sjoerd, just kind of to open the chat, you've been doing this for a while. Where did this start? Where did you start with your ability to create what are truly world-class molds?
It started back when I was at school and I was doing sculpting, and I wanted to make copies of my sculptures to try and sell it. Mold making, even back then, was becoming quite a lost art in that there was not a lot of information of how to make a mold online or in books. So this was all a long process of self-learning, making mistakes, making corrections, and ultimately self-taught in the mold making process. So yeah, from there, I worked when I left school, I decided I wanted to be an artist, and there wasn't too much in university to actually teach how to do mold making. Yeah. So whenever the question was asked, can you do it? And I was never yes or no, it was always okay. And went into it and learned on the job, learned on the fly.
It's sometimes hard because your learning curve is steep. When you're learning as you go, the errors often cost you a lot along the way, and that very regularly deters people from pursuing this as an avenue or a career. You said you wanted to become an artist. I've seen your work. I'm a big fan. You're an incredible sculptor. You did a crocodile fairly recently that was just absolutely amazing. Could you explain, for those who don't understand the process, to take a sculpture to a bronze, you have to make molds?
Yes.
Am I correct?
Yes.
And to copy the bronze, you have to make molds once again?
Yes.
Or do you use the original mold?
So you can, if you've got the original, you can make a mold from that. So when it comes to a handmade sculpture, you can make one mold and then copy it into a bronze. But we do bronzes here at SIT as well, and we cannot take the client's original skull to the foundry to do that, which is out of town. So we make first a mold and a cast of that original skull so that we can supply it. That way there's no risk to the client of losing the integrity of their bone. From there, the foundry will make a specific mold that caters for their techniques. The difference in casting in a resin compared to a wax is quite significant in that the mold needs to interact with the material quite differently. Sure. So yeah, when it comes to a handmade sculpture, you can do it once off because you know the intricacies of the material.
Yes.
But when it comes to bone, we have to preserve the client's bone integrity. So we make a different mold for that and send that off to the foundry, and they can do what they need to do with that.
Well, you see, making replica skulls it's not new to the taxidermy industry. Taxidermists have been doing it for years. They've been replicating a horn that gets shot off or gets broken. The taxidermist as an artist would recreate these horns. I think where this is different is the hyper-realism of the product that you're creating. Exactly. There's a couple of items sitting on the bench in front of you. Right down to the paint technique that finishes the skull. If you left this on any desk, any counter, and said to anyone walking past, what's that? They'd say, oh, it's a skull of some cat, without thinking that it is entirely synthetic. So an animal like a leopard that you've made a replica skull of, we don't need a permit to transport that because this is entirely made of
resin.
Yeah. So there's no permitting. What we have experienced, which is truly a testament to your work, is we've had customs officials declaring that the skull in the crate is not permitted. Yet we tell them, but it's plastic, it's not real. And they are adamant that it is a real skull. So unfortunately, you have to do the fire test, you burn a piece of it, and when it starts to melt, they suddenly realize, actually, this is plastic. So over here, you got this green thing. Don't you want to run through, just in short, simple, how you would make a mold of, let's say, what is this? A caracal or?
I think it's a little Oribi, this one.
Oribi, okay. How you would make a replica of an Oribi skull. So hypothetically, a hunter shoots a beautiful Oribi. He wants to do a shoulder mount or a full mount of his original, but he still wants a skull as a collectible for his Tiny 10 collection.
Yeah.
So you come along and we create a mold for an Oribi and then cast his horns, right?
Yes.
How do you do that?
So we take this one as an example. If this is the original skull that we have here, we'll first put a protective coating over the skull to maintain its integrity. We'll then coat this, we'll build a wall for it and coat it in a layer of silicone rubber. The silicone advantage is that it's flexible and it's quite durable. It's also the key element that captures the detail of the skull.
The detail on that skull, I mean, every crack, every crevice is there, and the silicone will pick that up every time.
Each time, yes. Picks up the sutures, all the pores, right down to any imperfection that's on the skull that's naturally there. It will capture that. And the hard substance over here is the resin that then holds the form of the silicone. Because it is a flexible material, it requires what's called a mother shell to hold the silicone in place.
That's the outer shell.
Yes.
And that's made out of fiberglass, resin.
And yeah, fiberglass and resin.
Yep.
Just something to stabilize it.
Okay.
So essentially it's working back to front. You're making an impression of the skull. And then that captures the detail. Once that's complete, it's the process of demolding. So this all gets neatened up and pulled apart. You can see here there's bolts that are sitting in the mold. This is to capture the different angles of the skull. So we call those panels because you can't have just one sheet over the skull. It has to be broken up into sections.
Yep.
And that just again preserves the structural integrity of the skull. So there's not too much force put on it when you take the silicone off of it. And it also prolongs the longevity of the silicone itself.
So we can use it again and again and makes it more economical.
Yes, because we do custom work quite a bit, but we're also looking now into doing a stock range. And because this is the most time that gets involved, we want to keep costs as low as possible so that this can be affordable to customers. So with this being the most time, we have to get the most amount of work out of it. If we can make multiple copies of it, we can keep costs down. And
it also goes back to, on the custom work, it goes back to, as you said, the integrity of the skull. So integrity of the skull that Sjoerd keeps mentioning is making certain that the original skull is intact and when returned to the client is beautiful, polished, and pristine, even though it has been taken through what is quite an industrious process to create that mold. Once you've created this, you've got your outside shell, you've got your silicone mold on the inside. I think that's a square of silicone over there.
Yes, so this is actually a caracal tongue. This is for a different application where we do open mouth mounts. Mm-hmm. Obviously you have the detailed inside of the mouth, and we cast the jaw sets and the tongues here locally as well. So this is now part of the process. This has had resin poured into it, tinted to just a base tone color, and the team then will demold this so that it can pop out.
You've actually got a tongue in there. No way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's actually being cast, that one. And that's now a hollow cavity again.
That's incredible. So there's the cavity, and you would then pour your resin into there. That would be set into the housing.
Yes.
Once it cures, you literally pop it out the mold.
And like I said as well, like the silicone has now made a reverse impression of the actual form. So if it's got a groove in the skull here in the silicone mold, it will be sticking out, extruding. So when you pour the resin in again, it will then form that groove again. And
it will mirror exactly what you've done.
Exactly.
That's incredible. So obviously, over the years, methods have changed, but I think the basis of molding is fairly simple, creating flanges and cordoning off your piece to make sure that the molds extract without damaging the product inside. In terms of materials, what sort of advances have we seen in materials? Let's just say in the last 10 years. What have you noticed?
Well, the industrial development of silicone in particular has taken leaps and strides, in that you can now get a silicone that can do anything that you want it to. You can get something that's more commercial and more affordable, right up to something that is more heat resistant. So if you want to cast certain metals into it, you can do that, and more flexible, more long lasting. It's always a way off though between quality and cost. So with the materials that we use here, it's again balanced out to perform the function that we need. So to capture the most detail that we can get, but also remain affordable, that we can keep our costs reasonable and at a demanding price.
So it's business.
Yeah.
Creating a good quality product at a market-related fair price that would entice customers to invest in it.
The ceiling is limitless with this product range.
That's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So Sjoerd, I mean, lion skull, leopard skull, all of these things, you would cast in a sort of a white resin, and then you'd finish the patina with a painting method that then gets baked into the skull so that it retains that color and that finish. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
What about an animal that has horns? So there's a bontebok over there. You've got dark horns. Is that just a case of pouring black resin in?
Yeah, so the resin is tintable in that you can buy different pigments and modify your resin accordingly. With the horns themselves, we've gotten a lot of interest with what you mentioned earlier, in that clients would like to do multiple types of mounts or shields that with one animal. Buffalo in particular are quite popular. So we'll mold just the skull cap of a buffalo generally, and then cast it in a brown resin that then gets mounted onto the mount. And then the team of finishers will paint it up properly and make it look like the skull, which will still be intact and be able to be put onto a shield. And that way then the client can get a shoulder mount of their buffalo as well as a complementary shield mount of the same animal.
Fantastic, fantastic. Right, so here's possibly a curveball, but I'm very interested in your opinion as an artist and also as someone who's mastered the art of mold making. Do you think that with technology coming into play, like 3D scanning and 3D printing, it will take away from traditional molding? Or do they coexist in the same artistic realm?
I think where we are with 3D printing and 3D scanning, which is a technology that's developing by the month. Artists that do mold making and sculpting are in the same position as where painters were with photography. When the camera came onto the scene, everybody thought fine art is now dead, because you can just take a picture of stuff.
Whatever you want.
Or really. Whatever you want, yes. And I think that the two are going to co-inhabit with each other. We've already done that here, where we are looking at 3D printing as well as incorporating that into a hand-molded thing. So we can 3D print a skull, and then which doesn't have the same ability to capture detail as what a hand-molded item does, but incorporating a hand-molded set of horns onto that skull, so that the client again can get the best of both worlds in the cost and the quality of the two.
So essentially what you're saying is they live in the same artistic space and work well with one another.
I think it's scary now with how the technology is developing so rapidly. But I think at the end of the day, everything is going to level out, and they will co-inhabit, and there will be different niches for both sides of the technology.
Yeah. What do they say? Video killed the radio star. So at the end of the day, it's progress.
Absolutely.
You know, and I know you spend quite a bit of time utilizing technology and kind of marrying it with old school techniques that you've now perfected. Do you get the same amount of enjoyment, or is it less of a challenge?
I think it's maybe just a personality trait, but the reason why I've been able to do mold making and not get bored with it for 15 years is because every day there's a new challenge, and it's continually innovating. There's always a new thing to try out, a new idea to practice, and a new door to open. And 3D printing is just another one of those doors that are opening.
It's a tool. It's a great tool.
Absolutely.
To the artist.
Ultimately.
So, mold making in itself is an art form. It's an art form that often gets overlooked, but it's an important art form in the taxidermy and preservation industry at large, whether it's for museums or for private collectors. The one thing with replicas that we've seen in the past few years is that it's literally taken the wind out of the sails of the anti-hunting movement. Replicas are exempt from shipping embargoes, from groups that are protesting, because it's all plastic. So as a proud hunter, we are still able to stand up for what we believe in, which is responsible, ethical hunting. And even in situations like we've had recently with Bontebok and lion going into the United States, hunters are still able to hunt this quarry, have an incredible experience, and then make a replica of their exact animal. That replica then goes back, and it becomes a memento and a reminder of an incredible experience. So I believe that there's a very important place for mold making and replicas in the taxidermy industry. I know I've been asked more than once if 3D printing and replica technology is going to take away from taxidermy. I don't believe it will. Much like Sjoerd, I believe they coexist. And when utilized effectively, it is purely for the benefit of the hunter. From an educational perspective, it's allowing us to create these pieces and put them into museums, distribute them easily to schools, use them as learning aids to grow awareness around wildlife, and bring the next era of custodians of wildlife into the marketplace. So what you're doing, Sjoerd, it's incredible. When I say that I've put your molds next to the real thing and I can't tell the difference, I cannot tell the difference. You need to go up, you need to feel them, you need to look up the nasal cavity to see that it's a replica. The fact that we're still using age-old methodology and we've perfected it and married it with technology like 3D scanning and 3D printing just shows the evolution of taxidermy as a whole. And it shows that artists like Sjoerd are embracing it and evolving with the technology around us. Sjoerd, thank you. I know that what you've explained is a very high bird's eye view, because I know how difficult it is to get a mold done properly. There are air bubbles and resins that don't kick and catalysts that are wrong and failed molds and all of those learning curves that you've experienced over 15 years that contribute to the incredible product that you make today. I followed your journey and what you're creating very closely because it's inspiring. I'm highly respectful of your art form. I love your fine art. That crocodile, like I mentioned, is incredible. It's a beautiful hand-sculpted piece. I really appreciate your knowledge. I know there's more intricacies to what you do. But as an artist, thank you for contributing to taxidermy, to offering the industry at large an alternative, new opportunity, a safety net against those who don't want us to hunt.
And I'm super grateful that I met you 3 years ago, because this industry offers an opportunity for artists to perform their craft in a way that the commercial world doesn't allow for. And when you and I sat down in your office 3 years ago, you said, I know that they make replicas out there, and I don't want to make replicas. I want to make the best replicas. And it was a case of, okay, let's do it.
And you've done it.
I think, and we're doing it every day, and we're getting better every day, which is wonderful.
Well, I appreciate what you've done. I appreciate what you've taught me. I've learned a pile from you over the years, and I know we're going to learn a lot more. Sjoerd is an incredible artist. He is one of many great artists that the taxidermy industry holds. And it's great to sing his praises and bring him into the light as someone who has a unique 10,000 hour skill as a master mold maker. Replicas, I think they're a good thing, and they're here to stay. It's going to help us protect the wildlife that we love and allow hunters internationally to continue hunting, irrespective of the barriers that get put up in our way. This is Taxidermy Truths. Sjoerd is a master mold maker and is changing the way that we get to produce these incredible animals. Thanks for listening.